All right, and we are live. How's everyone doing? Still farming monsters? We'll make sure. I think they're on a few second delay. It looks like they are just now seeing us over on YouTube. Yeah, but it looks like everything's going good. I can hear you. Let me double check that I'm streaming your audio. Um, All right, I have your volume maxed out and I see it outputting. Um, yeah, it's on the scene. So we have collab cam. You have a great connection. Let me see if I turn you up even more. Are you? Nothing at all. All right. Give me just 1 second as I try and figure out. Let's try this one. Yeah, I won't turn anything off. Um, I guess there is. It looks like Twitch is like 15 seconds behind. Let me open it up. I have it open up on another monitor, but that monitor doesn't have volume. So I'll open it up. I'm guessing the same's on YouTube, right, guys? You can't hear Brian because if it's just Twitch sided, it'd be crazy. Yeah, we have a few. It looks like Soul, Axel. All right, global settings. So you're on stream track one. Yeah, I might try something that'll be scuffed for now. Um, oh no, because then they'll be on the same. No, they won't. No, they won't. Where is it at? All right, Brian, can you give it a test?
Yes.
All right,
Test.
Brian, can you give
Test.
it a test?
Testing.
Brian, can
Let's
you
see
give
if
it a
they say
test?
anything.
I maybe started an infinite loop. I may that might not be great. All right. How about now, guys? Can you hear Brian when he talks? I just
Test. Test. How about now? It'd be pretty funny if they were all just messing with us. There we go.
All right, so it's a workaround for now. We'll figure out something better for a future stream. But what I did is I just turned on my desktop audio. So it's just my desktop is picking you up. So then I'm just having my desktop put it out. So Brian his voice might be like 1 or 2 seconds behind his mouth since it's going through that extra channel. But at least we don't have to spend any more time on that, and we can get to spoilers and more exciting things than audio issues.
All right, how many people we got on the stream? A bunch.
We got 6 over on Twitch and 26 on YouTube, so we're sitting around 30.
A lot of people over on YouTube. Well, welcome everyone. This is although it's not the end of the event for Walktober and the community preview number 2, it is our sort of closing down party for us to check in with everyone, see how things have gone this week, answer some questions, and kind of give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek and update about future stuff coming. I hope everyone has enjoyed their time in Kogia. It seemed like we had some pretty good turnout. If you've been looking at the numbers, we definitely have had more people playing for longer than last time. I think last time, I think the latest numbers were like 2,500 plus hours played over the span of 5 days, which is pretty good. So obviously, we've been able to learn a lot and give you guys a chance to sort of get some experience with some of the work we've been doing in the past 3 months. So obviously, we focused mostly on the battle system. And for most of you know, this battle sort of system is the first pass. What we wanted to do was to take sort of the essence of Genesis and bring that spell set to the world of Kogia, so that way you can kind of get a feel for sort of the basics of combat. So what you're seeing now is really just sort of focused on individual play. A lot of the group spells and things are not sort of fully fleshed out. But it's been sort of a good introduction, I think, to the way that the combat system is going to work. Obviously, much different than Genesis, and I think so far people have been enjoying it. To be honest, I don't think I've gotten too much negative feedback at all, which has been pretty good. I don't know what your experience, Tyler, was so far during the event.
No,
you were playtesting beforehand, but it's definitely been different with everyone online.
I miss my super speed, but I like the interaction of seeing other players besides just testers all running around at warp speed, not really interacting. Now it's like, oh hey, I just saw a community member I recognize. I give him a jump since there's no teabag in the game. That's like the universal one, so I don't have that option. So I give him a jump and maybe a dance, and I move around.
Yeah.
But no, it's been really fun seeing all the players. We were taking some pictures today of our guild, and we were just all around Abe, and we just see a bunch of new players with synthetics walk in, and there's just a bunch of people in Pumpkinhead standing in the graveyard. So it's stuff like that I think is really fun, where like it's just something that happens in gaming. Like a new player's just gonna walk around and see 7-10 people in a Pumpkinhead and be like, what is going on?
Yeah, it's kind of a cool way to sort of experience. I was just down like at the front of Treetop in Dendra, and there's like just random people standing here.
I just switched the stream because I was just killing old Salty because I need to finish my own questing since I had it reset for streaming. And look right here, community member Souls right here. I'm pretty sure he's in the stream too. So I'm just running around, and it's funny like that when you're just playing a game and you're like, hey, you're supposed to be working. Whereas right now I can say this is work. So it's always fun.
I get that all the time. I'm like, they're like, what are you doing? Why are you not working? I'm like, I am working, guys. So it's kind of a cool little thing. We've got, I think most people probably would agree, like the progress that we've made has been pretty significant. I mean, even something like having chat working across servers and things like that is sort of a huge step forward for us as a game. We've been in some conversations with some folks who have been sort of key stakeholders and been following us for a period of time, and have gotten feedback basically that like either A, we're actually starting to build the stuff that we promised that we would build, and things are starting to come together, or that they're just surprised at how quickly we're able to sort of bring sort of features to the game, which is super exciting.
Kind of like the Pumpkinhead. I know the Pumpkinhead was more of a last minute idea, and you guys were able
pretty
to
much
add
everything
that.
coming out of marketing was a last minute idea this time.
So it's very cool that we were like, you know what? It's Halloween. It's a October playtest. How sick would it be if people were running around in a pumpkin? So
And
Very
it's
cool.
kind of cool to be able to see like the cross, like we keep touting the cross game, cross franchise ownership and portability of assets that like NFT gaming is supposed to bring to the table. And now players are starting to see it because they'll be able to kind of play each other in Genesis with their pumpkin heads, and they can come and run around in the 3D world with them on too. So we're starting to sort of see some of the delivery of the promises on the benefits of using Web3 in gaming, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
I will say just something from the chat. I know you were you were kind of flexing how good the playtest was. Little complaints. There are a few people in chats who said they got kicked like 10 to 15 times, and I do know day 1 and 2 we had that server like
yeah,
mismatches. I don't know if you can speak, give players a little bit insight of what happened there, because I know since
yeah.
then
No, I
it's
mean,
been very strong. But definitely
yeah, I
day
think
one, almost like any launch, um, there's going to be
yeah.
a little
So
bit
I
of
think there's
a
a couple of things going on. Anyone who's in game development, maybe most of you aren't, but everyone knows that building MMOs are notoriously difficult. Like when you first start out, one of the things when you're doing game development, like the first thing everyone tells you is don't try and build an MMO. It requires a lot of patience and a lot of sort of very technical things to make work. And so what you're seeing is the reason why we do these events is really for us to not only showcase the fact that we're making progress, let the community have some fun and play around, but we do a lot of learning. So we're already seeing some of the benefits from some of the stuff that we're what we did from the first playtest. There are sort of some key metrics when it comes to building an MMO that you really look for in terms of like benchmarks for performance. The first community preview, we were probably like 4 or 5x the key benchmarks that we were targeting. So like things like the amount of network traffic that you're sending. It's kind of geeky, but at the end of the day, like the only way that you can keep the game in sync is you have to exchange data between players. And so first community preview, our average player average traffic per player was somewhere around like 60 to 70 kilobytes per second. And our benchmark targets like somewhere around 10 when you're not really running around and fighting, and around 20 when you are. Based on the current numbers, we're right around like the 12 to 15 mark. So you're talking about a 4x improvement over the span of just 3 months. So we're sort of using these community previews to really sort of hone in on challenges. We're doing some troubleshooting and working with Unity, who's the game development platform that we work off of, to understand sort of what happened during that first day, and try and start to continue to optimize things. The first community preview, for those of you who weren't around, we had a similar issue. I think we crashed pretty hard when I think we were at like 50 or 60 players initially, all logging in at once. This time we made it well over 100, like 120, so almost 2x the number of players. We also have found that there's some weird things with people having old game instances. So, like if you have an old version of the game and you try and log in, there are some problems that it can cause that can crash the server. So we're starting to sort of fix that. Where we added version checks. So moving forward, basically the game will check the version before you try and connect. But in general, like the reason why we're doing all this, in addition to it being a lot of fun to kind of to play around and explore something, is also to learn a lot.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
I
play
think all
tests.
have.
Like it's you play
Yeah,
the
I mean
game,
that's really
figure
what
out
we're
what's
doing.
wrong. Like it's
Yeah,
almost good when things break, because if things went
yeah,
smoothly, it'd be like,
yeah,
what next? But now it's like
yeah,
every play test, we're like, oh, this went wrong, this went wrong. Players like this, they didn't like this. How
yeah.
can we expand on that? So
Yeah, and the thing that's super interesting about the way that we've built this game compared to like a lot of other games that have been built is everything is sort of framework based. So when we find an issue and fix it, it fixes similar issues across the entire game. So what we're doing right now is sort of building out that foundation. The things like player movement, synchronization, all of the combat syncing, animations, this type of stuff, timings, all of that stuff is sort of the critical part of building a game. Like if we want to go build like uh, a bunch of new creatures, there's no coding to do that. To drop some creatures in the world, build out a new region. We've built the game in a way that there's no code. So all we're really doing is refining and playtesting the base features. And once we get those solid, then we'll basically start accelerating in terms of like stuff that we're working on and new features and things like that. But to be honest, like if you look at, in addition to not only like the improvements we've made from a performance perspective and a technology perspective, but just the feature set. I mean, we added a full battle engine and chat and a bunch of guild stuff in the span of 3 months, really. Like
Mm-hmm.
3 to 4 months at most. I think the last preview was like July-ish, right? Sometime around then. So I think
Yeah,
we're looking at
summer.
like 3 to 4 months. And that, I mean, obviously nothing's perfect. Well, I wouldn't even consider us an alpha, to be honest. Like we're pre-alpha right now, and alpha would, from my perspective, would be significantly more stable. We're slowly working towards that, obviously, to get to the point where like things in game are sort of more stable, and we can kind of start looking at what it takes in order to start getting players into like a pre-early access. But we're at the point where we're just sort of starting to work through the and finish up the base mechanics. But I've been super happy with it. We get, like I said, we get a lot of data. I think I have a list of about 120 bugs that we've uncovered, and and we haven't even really touched what the players have sent in. And then we've probably I've got at least 20 to 30 feature requests and things that people like, enhancements and things. So it gives us a lot of good information. Um, but like I think I just saw you go swap to Hamu too. Like um, 3 months
Yep.
ago, we couldn't even transfer regions.
I
Like
gathered a hunting party to lead me to the Dark Leaper. So I just went by Abe, which is almost like the new player gathering spot, since that's where everyone finds
yeah,
themselves. So we'll probably take a screenshot at the end of stream too if you guys want to meet us back there. But yeah,
yeah,
speaking of like player reports and stuff, I think we collected some questions from the
yeah.
community, and I think you have a list of ones that you want to go over. Is there? I see
Yeah,
people.
I
This is
think
going to be every stream. Something about land. Um, did land make it on that list? Is land something we want to talk about today, or do we want to focus
so.
more on preview?
I
Um,
think land is something that we're starting to formulate the foundation of how things are going to physically work, in like technically and also logically work. One of the things you guys know from hearing me talk on stream, if you've ever heard me before, is I'm not the type of person who likes to just sell something or drop something that you can't actually use. Like, it's a huge pet peeve of mine when it comes to gaming, and especially in the Web3 space. Like, people overpromise and underdeliver all the time. Like, you're constantly saying, like, people say, oh, your token's going to have utility, these NFTs are going to do something. They're selling you on a promise, and the real question is whether or not they can deliver on that promise. And so from my perspective, I like to go the other way. I'd much rather under promise and over deliver, and sort of give players the ability to actually use stuff when it drops. So like the pumpkin heads, for example, a lot of other games would have dropped and sold the pumpkin heads, and then you wouldn't have been able to use them for a while.
mhm.
We basically made sure that it was something, if we were going to sell something or give something away, that it's something that you can actually use when it drops. So from my perspective, like, we're still formulating exactly what's going to happen with the lands, and how they're going to work, and what the utility is and the mechanics. And so until we have that sort of all nailed down, we're likely not going to do a land drop. So I won't have too much in terms of details, but just know it is something that we're actively working on and we are making progress on. And as soon as I have more information, obviously I'll sort of share it with everybody. I think there was a couple of questions related to like the world and its size and sort of functionally how it's going to work. I think there was one question like, taking the size as a parameter, what is the target number of players you intend to have playing? um, our original target was roughly 10,000, like a cap of like 8 to 10,000 players per server. As we start digging in, we're realizing that that is not only unlikely but unnecessary. So I think some of the biggest games you've seen like ever have been like 14 to 16,000, but they are small, like they're like space simulations and things, not MMOs. If you take sort of like World of Warcraft as a benchmark, which is sort of like the main, the sort of what I would consider the hallmark of MMOs. They have, I think, between like 4 and 6,000 people per server, and their servers are actually not servers. They're what I think they're called servers, but they're more like what we call realms, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But their players are split out over a bunch of different regions, different servers. Are in the most recent release, something that no one has really seen, but is something that we also did deliver on. is we created the concept of realms. And so a realm in World of Kogia is essentially the equivalent of like a World of Warcraft server. And so a realm will be made up of the 8 different region servers. So one for each of the elements, plus Primus, which is the main city, plus a bunch of different servers for dungeons and battlegrounds and PvP. And so the world itself will be split up into realms. When it comes to talking and sort of engaging and interacting and doing things with players, you'll be constricted mostly to your realm to start. So you can imagine most likely at launch we'll have 3 realms, one in the US, one in EU, and then one in Asia. Um, Most likely just in order to help with paying and other stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. What we're seeing right now is you guys are all playing on EU1, which is the first realm in the EU region. So to answer the question, our target is still somewhere in like the like 4 to 6 thousand player range now, in a single realm. So the nice thing about the design is it allows us to expand. So, for example, if we feel like the EU servers are getting too heavy, there's not enough people, there's too many people logged in, things are getting laggy, we'll basically spin up a new realm in the EU. It'll be EU2, and players will be able to migrate over to it, and then more new players can sign up. So that's sort of our approach on how we scale. We've been building to bring 1 million+ players into the game. So we obviously, you're never going to have 1 million players on a single server or even on a single realm. So this is basically how MMOs typically are structured. The way that the stuff has been built, we do potentially have the capability of doing cross realm communication in dungeons. So, like, if you're in the same geographical region, but you are on EU, like, let's say, Tyler, you were on EU1 and I was on EU2, we'd technically be able to talk and play with each other in the future.
Mm-hmm.
We've built it to support that, but it probably wouldn't be like that at launch. Um, there was another question that came up about sort of are we going to be restricted to one realm or server in this case is what they said. We will have the ability for you to move between realms. We're still formalizing whether or not there's going to be like a cooldown or anything like that. Moving between realms in the same geographical region will be a lot easier, so there may not be a cooldown. So if you're on EU2 and you want to log into EU1, it's probably not going to be as big of a deal as if you were on the US one and you were trying to log into EU1. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll definitely be working through a lot of that stuff, but we do obviously have plans on how we scale this thing up to 1 million+ players, 10 million+ players, if and when the time comes.
And for most players, this is just going to be a non-issue. They're just going to
Yeah,
log
I
in,
mean,
play the game. It'll connect to the best server.
yep,
But
yeah,
obviously, there are those dedicated players who may want to play across the world and stuff like that, and they have those concerns. But yeah, it's nice that you're thinking ahead to handle an increased amount of players, which is what everyone wants. Everyone wants
yeah,
more
and I
players.
think that was probably the source of the question.
Mm-hmm.
So we're slowly working up to it. The challenge with the community previews is everyone is on the same server for the most part. So like 4,000 players spread out over 8 servers is only 500 players per server, and a lot of times when we're doing these community previews, like there's 100+ players in a small area at once. And so that's where the server really struggles. Like, I don't know of any MMO that has had good luck with, like, if you've ever played any MMO, there's a world boss and you're like, everyone is lagging, the whole server comes to a crawl, half the time it crashes. That's just pretty standard for MMOs. So
I
like
play
what we're
a New World, Amazon's MMO, and that was rough. And they had Amazon behind them, and they
yeah,
couldn't even handle those world boss events and stuff. I know in that, especially in that first region around the first week of launch, I'm dropping frames, I'm dropping connect. It
yeah,
was rough. So yeah, there's
yeah.
definitely no
So
stranger to that
that's why
kind
we
of.
do. Yep, and that's why we do these previews. Is like it teaches us a lot. So next preview, we're going to be doing some things to optimize and cap network traffic so like the server doesn't crash, but maybe you're only going to see updates for the closest 40 players or something. Because it one of the interesting things about MMOs is you talk about MMOs, but like you realistically can't interact with 50 people. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just not possible, right? Like it's cool to see them all around, but you're never going to actually be able to like battle with 50 separate people. So we'll do some more optimization to kind of improve things there. Um, and so that'll sort of help. And obviously, as we expand the game, we'll be able to sort of people will move across regions. You'll be playing in different places. I don't think I've really covered this, but one of the cool aspects of the game is we're actually working to build it so that people want to sort of explore. So if you've ever played an MMO, a lot of times people will like just hang out in like the one region that is the high level cap region,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like you play the game and then you leave the region and
Yeah,
you
like
never come back.
six of the seven regions have no
Yeah,
resources for you.
yeah.
So
So that's stupid. That's kind of stupid to me. So what we've tried to do is we've taken a different
sorry
approach.
to interrupt real quick. We're by Abe and people are stripping down to their underwear and jumping in the water. is what is happening
Go
now.
going swimming.
We're all swimming in the water out here. So, but
Inflatable
continue,
tap.
continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. What was I talking about? Now I lost my train of
I
thought.
forgot to. um,
Well,
but yeah,
hold on.
if anything, if someone in chat was interested in what he was saying and remembers, let us know. There's another one in chat. I know you have your list. But
Yeah.
this person asked. It seems NA has a lower player count compared to EU and Asia. Do you have stats on NA players from preview, and are there marketing plans to increase NA?
Yeah, so I think we have a ton of data. We collect the location data of everybody that logs into the game, and so I think we've got a fair contingent from South America. I think North America probably is a little bit lighter, and I think a good chunk of the players are from the EU. I think that's pretty actually relatively like our breakdown. I think is relatively normal based on what I know about like the World of Warcraft metrics in terms of like how their player
Mhm.
base is broken out. Um, but obviously, our goal is to expand player count across the board. Like our question is always how do we onboard the next 10,000, next 20,000, next 30,000 players. So you'll
Mhm.
see, as you probably have seen, we've been doing a lot of partnerships and ramping things up. We had spent a bunch of time trying to focus on Web 2 players. And we found that it was a little bit hard to get them to stick to Genesis. So we're sort of taking a different approach with the synthetics and the free to play. Is we're focusing on a lot more on Web3 players who do appreciate the concept of ownership while we build out sort of features that are sort of Web2 friendly.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's sort of that's sort of what our focus has been on. I remember what we were talking about before. So we were talking about how players typically are just focused in one high level
Oh yeah,
region.
one region.
And so we're going to explore, and obviously nothing's set in stone, but we're going to explore sub-region based downscaling. Um, and so basically, as you play through the game, I think I've mentioned this before in a previous stream, your Cryptomon's training levels are impacted. Like the amount of their training that they have access to is based on your trainer's level. So your trainer will have an actual level as well. And so your trainer could be level 10, but your Cryptomons could be level 50, but you will have reduced stats on your Cryptomon. Like you won't be able to just go to the shop, buy a level 50 Cryptomon, walk into the game, and blow through the first 50 levels of content. So the plan is basically that your Cryptomon will be downscaled based on your trainer's level. In addition to this, we have plans to play test downscaling the trainer level based on the subregion level. So I think for those of you that are um, in Bosco right now, you probably notice that there's sort of a distinct sort of feeling of uh, stylistic difference between certain areas. Like for example, there's the Lichkey Forest, which is like the autumn um, brown colored leaf
Mm-hmm.
forest where the rabid rosetails were. That subregion would have a specific level, and so if you were to walk into that subregion, you would get downscaled. So even if you were going to go help your friends, you'd sort of be downscaled up to the cap for that subregion, and so you would still be able to go back and gather resources and play content. Um, in addition, oh jeez, why are people calling me? It's Amit's fault. Basically, the other thing that we're going to do is each of the regional maps are all levels. So the initial plan is level 0 through 50 is sort of the level cap when we go to launch, and each of the maps has has a 0 to 10, a 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40. So they all sort of have that same. There's a reason to basically be in each region, which is pretty cool.
That is awesome. So I'm looking at the chat. It looks
Sure,
like
I can pause to see if there are any other
the
questions
only
there.
other question is about resources and region exploration. And I don't know if you want to clarify that a little bit.
So I
Or,
think
or not
from a
you, the question, because I don't know
uh,
exactly.
what
But
the
it's
what they're talking
resources
about.
and region exploration. If you have anything on that you want to touch on.
Yeah, I mean, so the game that you're experiencing right now is obviously just designed for a small community preview. When you one of the feedbacks that we get is that like people are looking for more content, and obviously everything feels far away, and there's sort of a lot going on. Um, However, what you're experiencing is really not like the way that the gameplay loops are going to work. So we're just testing sort of basic features. There is going to be an entire sort of journey of the player. Everything is going to be guided by quests. So like you'll go into an area, like take that autumn forest, Lichkey Forest area, and right now it's just filled with rabid rose tails. But in the future, basically, there's a city there, a town there. There'll be NPCs. You're going to be getting quests. You'll go there. I think there was like 35 different quests in that one small area, between like killing creatures, collecting things, helping people out. And so the way that the game sort of flow of exploration works is it's very guided. You're going to pick up quests. They're going to tell you to go someplace. You're going to go do some quests there. You're going to talk to people, learn about the story, and then you're going to basically go to the next area. Um, we also have been focusing a little bit on like free flow and sort of variety. So because each of the regions like Hamu and Bosco and Uko have all of the different level caps, you'll have a little bit of flexibility while you're playing to level. So like if you want to finish up Bosco and you're level 10 and you're kind of sick of Bosco, there's going to be a way for you to start a quest line that's in Hamu that lets you sort of explore Hamu. Um, and so that's sort of the flow of exploration. In terms of resources, everything that you see in the game is completely customizable without any code. So like the respawn on creatures, the mining nodes, where they're placed, what the resources are that come out of them, the drop rates, the loot tables, all of that stuff is pretty much already done. It's just a matter of us going through and sort of designing the game using the frameworks that we've built and the engine that we've built. So resources will basically be balanced based on like how rare they should be. The respawn time will obviously dictate like how rare something is. So like if you're going to try and farm like oak hearts, for example, uh, maybe oak hearts are pretty common. They're in all the low level zones. They have a fast respawn, and they're a material that's used pretty heavily in sort of like early game crafting. When you get to sort of more of the end game stuff, things like helix essences, which are very rare energy essence that are used in like high level crafting and things like that. They will drop off the loot tables very rarely. And obviously, we're building an in game auction house too, which has been mentioned, so players can basically sell each other resources and buy them if they need to. Obviously, another big piece of the economy, which I think was one of the other questions that we had gotten to. Um, there's a question I think about like how what the economy will be like, how you'll earn Kmon coin. A lot of that stuff we're still working through. Things that we've kicked around. Obviously, you guys know that the ability to sell in-game resources, which doesn't exist in Genesis, but will exist in Walk, is a way for players to sort of convert their time into Kmon. We've also talked about possibly doing a small amount of Kmon per quest as a lead up, because obviously we know how many quests a player can play, giving people a little bit of a base of Kmon to do the things that they need to do, like to travel or other things like that. And then probably most likely some of the dungeon stuff. So
Yeah,
we'll have
actually,
yeah.
sorry, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I know we have that entire page of or that secret content folder I'm looking at. Is there anything from there I should pull up? I just changed the stream
Yeah, I
on there,
mean, why don't
so I
yeah, why don't
accidentally just leaked. Right now on the stream is the poacher's cabin. So that's our
yeah.
background for this talk, and then I'll pull up different things as you talk about them.
Yeah. So I think there was a question about like what region will come out next during the preview, that type of the next preview. So we have Bosco and Hamu finished, so Ghost and Grass, and Uko, which is the desert region, is about 70% complete. So we're finishing that up now. And then the next one would be starting would be Aura, which is the air the air region. However, the next preview will not feature a new region, and that is because the next preview will be the first ever dungeon preview. Um, so dungeons are a key part of MMOs. They're sort of like the bread and butter. Like everyone loves going out and leveling and open world questing, but everyone really likes the dungeons. Like that's where you sort of grind your armor and get your character to be to better and improve your character. And they obviously feature cool boss fights. So I am happy to announce that the next preview will officially be a dungeon preview. And it will feature the first dungeon that players will actually ever encounter in the world of Kogia at launch, which is known as the Poacher's Lodge. So you've got some concept art here in the background. Obviously, the scale will be significantly different, but our concept artist basically mocks stuff up so that way we have sort of an aesthetic, and then our designers take it and expand on it. Um, the Poacher's Cabin, like I mentioned, is the first dungeon that you'll encounter as a player. Most likely, it'll be somewhere between level 10 and 15. Um, and it will feature sort of three distinct areas. Do you want to bring up the map itself?
Absolutely. Let's hope this is what you're talking about. All right, it should pop up on stream here in just a
Yeah.
second for you.
Yep. Sounds good. So the dungeon is 2 floors. This is my beautiful attempt at building out layouts for dungeons. It will basically feature three distinct zones. Your upper level, which was your sort of actual sort of wood cabin feel up above, which is what the background is that you see in the background. And then after your first boss encounter, you'll head downstairs to the basement, and you'll enter sort of the basement area, and then you'll encounter another boss. And then the third area is basically a cavern at the end past the basement, where you'll encounter yet another boss. If you want to pull, you can close the map, and if you want to pull up like the second concept art, actually, do you have the close this and bring up? I guess leave the cabin in the background and
Yeah.
bring up the kennel master.
So is this
One
something
sec.
players are going to face alone, or will there be a
No, so
party
yeah,
system
so
in the
this
game?
This
That
will be the first ever 5-man dungeon. So dungeons will be 5-man. You'll group up in our party system, which is currently under development. You'll basically be able to have a party leader or invite people to party. And then you'll essentially join together into a party, be able to see who's in your party. And then there's a bunch of different new spells that you guys have probably seen or heard about, where things like healing. So you'll typically have sort of an archetype in the role. You'll have a tank, so we're adding spells that'll be used for Cryptomon to tank. I think I maybe spoiled some of this on the Trainers Club, but there are two elements that are capable of tanking. Um, Ice and air will be the two primary tank elements. We're obviously adding more spells to make sure that works and other mechanics to make sure that works. They'll get things like a taunt. Air will get more damage mitigation. Ice will get some more defensive spells. Um, so you have a tank, you'll have a healer. So I think I also announced in Trainers Club chat that there'll be two healing elements. So water and grass will be the two healing elements. One thing to note, like just because something is a healing element doesn't mean it can't damage and do DPS. The players obviously need to be able to do stuff on their own single player, so they'll have mechanics for doing damage and whatnot. It's just that the majority of like the healing spells will be as part of like the grass or the water element. Um, and then you have a bunch of different DPS type classes. As of right now, we're still playing around with the concept of like physical melee DPS, where your Cryptomon is standing at the boss and fighting things. That's slated looking. It looks like it's going to be ground and ghost. And then you've got two sort of DPS range DPS caster type elements, which will end up being fire and electro. And that I think rounds out all of the elements if I did the math correctly. One, two, three. Yeah, that's all of the elements. The cool thing about Cryptomon, which I really like, is the fact that you have two elements in your class, and in your Cryptomon gives you the ability to kind of have a lot of flexibility. So just because your main element is water, maybe your secondary element's electro, and you can actually play pretty solid DPS. So it's kind of a cool way to approach game design, a little more freeform.
You're basically always multi-classing, which is great.
Yeah, pretty much.
You
It gives you a
always
lot of.
have
Yep.
those two family support. So if you're like, oh, we need more heals, we're taking more damage, you take off static electricity and throw on water blessing or something of
Yep.
those sorts, where you're like, all right, I got to flex into more of a healer role. So yeah, so you'll have
Yep.
10 elements between the 5 players. And are
Yep.
they going to be able to bring in 3 Cryptomon apiece in these dungeons, or do you all bring in 1 Cryptomon, or is that something the team's still debating?
That's still something we're gonna be play testing. A few of the general concepts we've played around with for balancing purposes is you won't be in a dungeon, you won't be able to swap in combat. So when you first engage a boss, you won't be able to swap your Cryptomon while in combat. So and then basically if your Cryptomon dies, you die. So it becomes like a 5-on-1 sort
Mhm.
of concept. Or the other concept is we leave it open and they can swap at any point. There's some challenges on why we're sort of thinking of limiting the swapping, and it's primarily because if somebody is a tank and they swap out to another Cryptomon, someone else has to swap into the tank, and it's just a little complicated from a gameplay
My vote,
perspective.
you have that party gathering screen, you all lock in 1 Cryptomon and it's ride or die. I think
Yeah,
that'd be super fun, where you build up your team comp, you all have that Cryptomon and you
yeah,
use it. That's
and
what you get to use. But obviously, I don't have
so,
full developing power, but it'd be very interesting
yeah,
to see
yeah.
what
No, so I
players are
think that
thinking too. Like
Yeah, it
a
would be
little
good
more
to see what people
hardcore.
think in general too. I think one of the things that I liked about the not being able to swap in combat, but still being able to swap in the dungeon, is that it makes it so like if you're on the first boss and that boss needs like let's say you decide you want to have like element like that one happens to be elemental and it can take extra damage from
Mhm.
an ice cryptomon. When you go to like the second boss, maybe the second boss is a little different or you need a different spec, you're not sort of locked in. Like maybe one of the bosses you really need 2 healers. Like the boss doesn't have a ton of health, but it hits really hard. And so being able to swap when you're not in combat gives players the ability to kind of spec per boss, and it makes it a little more interesting versus locking in. But those are sort of the decisions we're looking at. Um, but it'll probably like most likely it'll be one of those three.
All right.
Either you'll queue up with a specific Cryptomon, or you'll queue up but you can't swap when a boss fight is going on, or you'll like outside of combat, or you'll be able to come in with all three, and you're just gonna have to deal with the fact that if your tank decides to swap on you, someone's gonna have to figure out how to pick up
Mhm.
aggro and not wipe the entire party. But what we're sort of showing here is like what you've seen in the open world is the creatures that inhabit sort of Kogia. The dungeons will have creatures of that size and caliber, but they will also have what we're calling our bosses. This is a sort of concept sketch of our first boss encounter, which is the Kennel Master and his minion. So basically, you'll be fighting sort of the scale of things. I think I shared a quick video at one point, but like the bosses are going to be significantly larger. They're going to be in big rooms. There's going to be a lot of different mechanics. So when we talked about sort of this being the first glimpse into the combat system, the dungeons will sort of give you that next tier in terms of glimpse of what's going to happen when it comes to gameplay. Um, the bosses, you can swap to sort of the next section if you want. You can pull up the next background, I guess. And so, like I mentioned, the first part of the dungeon is the upper tier of the poacher's cabin, and then you're going to sort of venture into the basement. Uh,
Uh-oh. We lost him. Too many spoilers. Umberto had to take him offline. Um, well, now it's just me and you guys. I guess I can explain what's going on here. So it looks like a poacher. This is basically what you guys have been doing the last few days since you have been killing thousands of monsters. This is what happens. This is where all those monsters go. They go to the poacher, and you're just making the monster Cerberus and the Kennel Master angrier and stronger. Um, Let me see. The connection is still.
I'm still here.
Okay, you're back. I
Ah,
have no idea what happened, but
that was
we're
weird.
we're good. You just disappeared for a second.
I'm just not even sure if I can see chat. I'm just trying to see if I can see chat. What's the last thing on the Twitch stream? Was it when will there be naked characters? Is that really the
Yeah,
question?
yeah. And then there's
Okay.
there's more on YouTube. They're
Jeez.
saying bro's got Rocket Raccoon on the surgery table. So they're
We're gonna get like kicked off of freaking Twitch.
yeah. We
But
pulled
yeah,
up
so the cool,
taxidermy
like I
outside
was
of
mentioning,
October.
like the cool thing about that I liked about World of Warcraft was like the rich storyline and the lore and everything. And so this dungeon, you'll sort of walk through like a storyline leading up to the dungeon about a poacher who's in Lichkey Forest, which is the one of the starting areas in Bosco. And he's basically capturing creatures and performing experiments on them. You can see here, like the basement's kind of like a creepy taxidermy area.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so your job is to sort of help the locals stop the poacher from basically destroying the all of the creatures in the region. So you'll encounter the poacher in the basement, and so you can bring up that sort of concept art. Um, the poacher will be a sort of a very interesting mechanic. One of the things we're doing with this dungeon is exploring sort of specific boss mechanics. So on the first boss, I didn't really mention, but there'll be some additional creatures maybe that come out to attack you and things like that in the encounter. These encounters are not going to be like just five people sitting there smashing buttons and attacking stuff. The updates that we're going to be making to the battle engine will require you to basically be able to whistle and call back to your Cryptomon to help them avoid damage, to move them out of the way, to maybe move the boss to a different location. In this encounter with the poacher, you'll sort of come face to face with the dude who's been sort of wreaking havoc in Lichkey Forest. And is responsible for like the death of thousands of creatures, despite the fact we're doing a Slayer event right now.
I'm about to say the
And everyone,
poacher's name is going to be Pet Master. Or I'm pretty sure,
uh,
yeah. Pet Master
so
PH with 2,000 kills since the
yeah,
event started. He's taking down all of the snort hogs.
yeah, there will be
So,
no Snordogs left
mm.
at launch. They're officially extinct in Gojira. But we'll be playing around different mechanics. So anyone who's played World of Warcraft or some of your MMOs, like I'm a huge fan of like the don't stand in the red shit on the ground. Like
Very
that's
like
like the
falling boulders,
yeah, exactly.
like
Like all the other stuff where you're
poacher
like the
knockout
poacher,
gas. I don't know something.
one of the poacher's mechanics is he's going to drop traps,
Mm-hmm.
like bear traps. And if you are standing in the trap or your Cryptomon standing in the trap, when it goes off, you'll take damage, and there might be some other mechanics that get involved with
Yeah, nice.
sort
So
of
it's
things.
not just a stat check because I've definitely played
No,
some games where it's just like is your health and damage high enough? Is it greater
yeah,
than this guy? You win.
no, and I
Whereas
think
here you can maybe sneak your way in and maybe even beat the dungeon while a little under leveled if you avoid all the traps, avoid all
yeah,
the environmental elements of the battle.
yeah. The idea here is we're gonna really like from a gameplay perspective, it gets really boring when you're just stat checking, like you
Yeah.
said. Like no one like I remember playing some dungeons and I'm like, this the only reason that we're beating this is because we're way over geared. Like the people next to me are literal idiots and standing in fire. And they're like, look at me, I'm doing top DPS. Yeah, but you just caused the healer to have to heal like thousands of extra damage because you stood in the red stuff. Um, so we're basically building frameworks to manage bosses as part of this. So the purpose of this dungeon is for us to explore different types of mechanics, like the boss dropping traps or the boss creating things that you have to interact with. Maybe you have to disable something or free something. They could also just basically be something like the poacher fires out a rain of bullets from the sky, and you have to make sure you're
Mm-hmm.
not standing in it. Um,
And a
the
little
other
bit of
thing
a
that
shameless plug here. Trainer club members are most likely going to get to test all this stuff earlier than
yeah,
that. So if you have not picked up, if you've enjoyed this playtest and you're looking forward to future ones, take a look at our marketplace. Grab one of those trainer badges. It gives you early access to some of the leaks. I'm sure some of the leaks here have been seen in that group over there. So it's just if you're really excited and really dedicated, you can pick one of those up and get a little bit earlier access to all these things.
Yeah, and we do a lot of sneak peeks there too. So if you are very interested in like what's on the development schedule, the types of things that we're making progress on, we do share stuff there, like as spoilers early before they get publicly announced. So you can always pick that up and come hang out with us. Um, but yeah, so like the idea of this dungeon preview is going to be to build an engine for boss interactions. So being able to make the boss do something at a specific health amount, make them do something on a specific timer. The idea here is that we're like with the rest of the game, we're building an engine that makes it easy for us to add new bosses and to add new to add new interactions and things like that. So the focus of this is going to be on. I mean, it's the first dungeon, so there's going to be more basic mechanics. Like the first time a person comes into a dungeon, you don't want them to like have to know a billion different things to get through it. So there will be some of that stuff will either be pulled at release and be put into the heroic version of the dungeons, which is a little bit of a spoiler, or it'll be toned down. So we do plan on having two sets of dungeon difficulties. The dungeons that you play as you're leveling up will have a scaled up version of heroic, similar to like normal mode and hero mode in Genesis. And so you'll be able to play some of the dungeons again at a fully scaled up level with new mechanics. So maybe in heroic the poacher does drop the traps, but in the regular in the regular version he doesn't. But that's sort of the stuff that we're working through for the next preview. And then obviously the last part of the dungeon, we can sort of share a little bit of a spoiler there in terms of I won't go into too much of the story, but
Is this the cavern grass?
yeah, the cavern. So when you end up at the end, you will somehow, some way, as part of a storyline, end up in an underground cavern. Um, that is sort of a what looks like a peaceful grass oasis, but quickly turns into something that it's not. Um, and so there's a little bit of a spoiler of a boss in the middle. You'll encounter the third and final boss of the dungeon here. Those bosses, obviously, I don't know if there's been any question on the stream, but there were questions about like how do you get gear, what types of items are there. The bosses in the dungeons will drop gear and armor and equipment for your Cryptomon. So the dungeons become a way basically for you to level up the strength of your Cryptomon. So like if this is a level 15 dungeon, it would drop armor that was up to level 15. So that's sort of the approach. And you can bring up the quick spoiler on the final boss's concept art. I'm not going to share too much about this one. I don't want to spoil the surprise in terms of how you get there and what ends up happening. But the grass abomination that you see here is your final test in the community preview. Um, like Toa had mentioned, it's going to be a group thing, so you'll group up with 5 different people. In the preview, I'm not sure if we'll do a random queue. We may do random queues in the preview, but that will be something we'll probably do longer term. It might not make it into the preview. Eventually, you'll be able to like queue as a tank or stuff like that, queue as a DPS or healer, and that way we can do a little bit more matchmaking. But you'll party up. The cool thing about the party system is it also works in the open world. So like I know there were a lot of people who had questions during the community preview about like where things were or how things work. Um, I think a lot of people had a hard time finding Old Salty, which was pretty funny. He was intentionally not marked on the map just to see how frustrated people will get when I make the game a little bit difficult. Which goes
That's where the
back
wiki
to
comes in, though.
yeah,
Just
I'm
one
sure the
quick
players
Google
will create
search,
a
and you'll
wiki.
get. You are kind
They'll
enough
be,
to provide coordinates, so it'll be very easy if you get to the point where like, actually, I don't want to go explore for this monster. Just type it in on the wiki, you'll get the coordinates, and boom.
yeah.
It'll,
So and that's fine. Like that's a natural progression, and it's kind of cool to see a community rallying and building that type of stuff. There was a question on the stream about like whether or not there'll be a guide or a helper for the quests. We are going to make some improvements to the way that the quest markers work on the map and things. Like they're going to get numbered now. So like if you're on like the first quest in your list will show with a number 1 on your map, so that you can actually figure out like which one you're trying to do. But in general, like the design paradigm that I follow is like I want players not to struggle, but to like feel like they're working hard to accomplish something. I hate those games where like you literally are shown like a yellow line on the floor and you just follow the yellow line. Like anyone can do that. It
yeah,
doesn't really feel
it can
fun
be
to me.
nice if
So
you're forced to explore, and I know we've talked in the past. I don't want to spoil too much, but we
Yeah,
talked about filling up the world with things to collect, and there's so many
yeah,
collectibles and stuff and items you can gather. So who knows?
yep,
On your way to Old Salty, you're gonna find a plant you never saw, or an elemental
yep,
thing, an elemental energy you've never picked up. So it kind of
yep,
gives you that, like, you're supposed to be on a journey, and it's
yeah,
okay if you don't know
exactly.
exactly where you're going. And then if when you're fed up with it, you ask. Um,
Yep, and that goes.
so
I mean, to go along with it, that's why we add the social pieces. So, like, if we had done this community preview, I think, and last community preview, I think there were some people who had challenges, like without chat, for example. It's a lot harder for players to get the help that they need in game. So, like, you saw how friendly the community was. Like, people, like, I think it was like 20 something thousand chat messages sent over the course of like 5 days. Like, the community is super active and friendly. We got a lot of people that are willing to help out and just are sort of good people. And so the ability to do that, we're adding guilds to the game, as you probably saw some
mhm.
people with guild tags. I don't know if any people came across any of the sort of Web3 guilds that we onboarded, but there were a few of them that were invited to playtest that are some of the bigger names in Web3, which was pretty cool. So we'll get their feedback, but like you'll be able to join a guild. They'll be able to have a chat. You have your private chat with the guild, and they can help you out, and you can sort of have people help you out along the way. And so I think from a difficulty perspective, like I like to build games that are hard. I think I've probably been quoted at some point as saying basically I want heroic raids, which are like 25-man dungeon equivalent. I want them to break up guilds. Like I want the bosses to be so hard that it takes you weeks to kill that thing, and people are fighting and people are arguing, and it's like that's the awesomeness and struggle of like putting together a
Yeah.
group of people that are willing to commit to kind of figure out how to beat something.
That's how I felt. I was a big Destiny player,
Yep,
and some of those I remember the Taken King raid. I was playing with a group of buddies, and I was like, "We have to do this." And then we were like, "All right," we lost like for 4 hours in a row. I was like, "I can't do this." I was like, "All right, I'm gonna go to bed," and I found a different group
yep,
and beat it the same night. So it was like,
yep,
it,
yep. But
but
it's
it was
kind of
so
cool to see.
that feeling of winning was worth it because like I spent
Yeah,
8 hours fighting these four bosses in a row, and it was great.
yeah.
But
And
I
then just to kind of give like some insight into like difficulty levels, 'cause I think there were some questions on that. We had so we've got regular dungeons, which I mentioned, which will be like level based. They'll be like level 15, level 10, level 40. The creatures inside will be geared towards players of that level. There'll be an upgraded version of the dungeons, which are still 5-man, that are called heroic dungeons. Um, those will basically, or hero dungeons, those will basically be a scaled up version to level 50 or whatever the level cap is. Then you will have raids, which are sort of your end game content. So that this is sort of the progression of how things go. You'd finish your dungeons, you'd level up, you'd play your hero dungeons, you get some new gear. That gear will make you strong enough to go into what are called raids. And a raid is a right now it's a 25-man. We may scale it back down to 20. We're still sort of working through those mechanics. It will be the same concept as a dungeon, but the bosses will be harder, damage will be higher. There'll be a lot more healing requirements.
Mhm.
You'll need to really understand like, do I need 3 or do I need 4 healers? That type of stuff. Those will be you'll be able to do those once a week.
Yeah, and then I know a
So
lot of other games, like late game content PvP. Is there anything you can share on that in Genesis? Maybe like
yeah,
3v3s, different, like everyone brings
yep.
one Cryptomon kind of stuff like
Yep.
that.
So
Is there
that
any
in
PvP?
terms of like the raids on the this is all PVE side. So this is
Mhm.
all just player versus the
Environment,
computer.
whatever.
the the heroic, like I mentioned, there'll be 2 versions of raids most likely in the future. They'll be open. You can beat them once a week as your party, as a team. Once you start one with one group, basically you're locked to it. So you're going to want to find a group of people that you're willing to play and grind through things with. In terms of PvP, there's a bunch of different gameplay modes that are slated to be released. We're going to try it. I don't think it'll be next preview, but shortly thereafter, we're going to add the concept of dueling um, into the open world. So you can basically find another player, you can challenge them to a duel, and it would be basically your team of 3 Cryptomon versus
That's
their team of
awesome.
3 Cryptomon. And you obviously won't die if they kill you, although that would be pretty damn funny because I'm sure there'll be bugs at some point, and I'll just basically be like, "Oh, I guess you died." Speaking of which, I was watching World of Warcraft has like this new hardcore mode where like you basically, if you die, your character gets deleted.
Mm-hmm.
Which I've thought about doing something which is pretty cool, like having your NFTs get burned if you are in a duel and you lose.
Not
But
happening.
that's a whole other aside. But basically, there were some bugs where like the person was supposed to end at 1 health and then they didn't end at 1 health in a non-duel, and then they died and it was over, and their
Wow.
character got deleted. So it's just a funny thing that games end up having an issue with. But so we're gonna look at doing some sort of duels to introduce PvP. The sort of introduction to PvP in World of Kogia is going to be what are called battlegrounds. Battlegrounds are going to have a number of different formats. As of right now, I have 3 planned for sure. There are different mechanics for each of the battlegrounds. One is capture the flag. You basically have to pick up a flag and then bring it back to your base, and your opponent's team basically has to stop you from doing that. And that will most likely be 5v5 or 10v10. There is another game mode which is basically almost like control the base. So you'll basically be able to interact with like a base or a flag, and you'll be able to capture it for your team. And your team will basically get points for holding that base.
Oh, it's like King of the Hill.
Yeah, basically. And it might be 1 base, it might be 2 bases, it might be 3 bases. We're going to sort of play around.
That's almost
with
like domination. Then I'm just thinking of like other popular game modes I've heard.
Similar concept. So like you're going to control bases, you're going to get points per tick. Mm-hmm. The team that gets to to whatever, like a certain number of points will end up winning. And then the other one was essentially like a death match type mechanic. We're not 100% sure on it, but basically you play like 10v10, and last man, the person from the team that's last standing wins.
I already think it's just like search and destroy. I guess all of my game modes come from Call of Duty, so it's all pretty. But like search and destroy, you have 1 life and you need to play your life well.
Exactly. So we wanted to have like a battleground. Most of the other battlegrounds, if you die, you'll respawn and be able to come back out and play. We were thinking about doing a battleground on a large scale where like basically you die and it's kind of like the whole Fortnite inside of the storm.
I was about to say, I have to ask, is there going to be a Cryptomon Battle Royale? 10 drop in, level 1, you got to pick up your stuff.
So that was one of the games we actually had talked about as a potential game to expand the franchise in the future, where like you're dropped in as a trainer. You have to pick up an egg. You have to go find your first Cryptomon. You have to hatch it. You have to find evolution stones. You have to earn your spells. It'd be kind of a cool mechanic.
What do you guys think in the chat? I see Cryptomon football.
So that will potentially be in the future, but in World of Kogia, the next sort of closest thing is there's sort of another game mode for PvP, which is more advanced. So the current plan is in Battlegrounds, you'll earn basically points. They don't have a name yet, but they'll basically be the equivalent of PvP points. Those points are a currency that are used to buy NFTs for wearing PvP armor. So similar to the PvP armor that'll be coming out in Battle League, but a little bit different. So you'll basically earn your PvP points there, playing with friends and just kind of having some fun. And then we're going to add basically a ranked mode where you're basically playing 3v3, 5v5, or 2v2. And those are death matches. You're dropped into an arena. The team that has the last person standing wins, and it uses an MMR system. So basically MMR, ELO, basically it keeps track of your ranking and you go up and down based on how strong your opponents are. And then there'll be another set of PvP gear that you can earn that requires you to have a specific rating in order to sort of purchase it. So there'll be some progression in PvP. Right now, like I said, the next preview is focused on PvE, but I could imagine that the preview after that will probably end up being a battleground if I had to guess. So it'd be kind of cool to go out and play to play some PvP for the first time. Obviously, like I said, we're going to try and get duels in too for testing. But that's really an overview of sort of all the game modes that are planned. But yeah, I don't know.
I don't want to cut you off. We're running a little over time. I'm just going to do some rapid fire of some stuff. So you'll like this. A few people said Cryptomon Kart for some of those game ideas. Yeah. We got some fishing simulators, some solitary.
Cryptomon Racing League.
But yeah, Cryptomon cards seem popular.
I've always wanted to do like a Mario Kart variant, but Cryptomon Racing League based on like How to Train Your Dragon, like going through the loops and collecting items and shooting other Cryptomon down when you can, because adult Cryptomon can fly. So it's kind of a cool mechanic to build like almost like either Quidditch or like a How to Train Your Dragon course, and you run around, you have to fly around and do that type of stuff. I think that's a cool concept for the franchise in the future.
And then, just so we don't go too over time, just some rapid fire
Yeah.
questions. This person said Sandstorm is generating normal level of charges in Walk. Is this subject to change? And I believe that's something you've mentioned. The spells aren't really balanced yet. They're just
everything is subject to change.
Yeah.
So this is a very early gameplay. When we start to look at the dungeons, we'll start to balance damage even a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of stuff that's way out of range in terms of like what should be what the damage should be doing, cooldowns. Basically, what you're seeing is the mechanics. So spells will have cooldowns. They'll have a certain amount of duration that they last.
So like
that type of
Sandstorm is working properly. It's a buff that is increasing your attack, but then you have to fine tune it. Where like, okay, you're going to generate some less charges, and the duration and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's what we'll sort of play around with and figure out if it makes sense, where it makes sense to remove stuff.
This next one is... Oh, sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
But just
keep going.
So, will Soulbound be a mechanic? I don't...
So that is a touchy subject.
Account-bound items, kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a touchy subject in crypto. Part of the challenge with crypto is the wallet hacks. So, like, if you get your wallet hacked and you have a bunch of Soulbound items, it kind of sucks to, like, not be able to ever get those back. And so soulbound stuff is something that we're sort of moving away from. We tried to do some soulbound stuff with or like at least sort of bound stuff with the armor scraps, and everyone saw how well that turned out. So
the black market
I'm sort of going
sales.
back to like I'm going back to my free market economy theory of just let everyone do whatever the hell they want, and I'll find a way to help the company make money off of it a different way. But yeah, so like the idea is like you're going to be able to sell stuff. There might be NFTs that you have to burn in order to like learn a crafting pattern, for example. That's the type of stuff we may end up doing where like
that'd be smart. Like,
it's an on use, so that way like once it's burned, you can't like exploit it. But while it's an NFT, you can actually buy and sell and trade it, which is kind of a cool concept.
It goes like NFT into an account item, something like that.
Yes, exactly.
So like if you get that super rare boss drop, you don't want this healing potion, and this is obviously I'm just making stuff up here, but if you don't want that healing potion crafting recipe, you either sell it or if you don't have it yet, you burn it and then you learn that recipe. That kind of thing. So
that would be the general concept. Maybe you can socket that recipe and put it into a forge on your house or your forge on your land or stuff like that. So we're going to play around with the burning of stuff too. It's kind of a cool mechanic. Obviously, with NFTs, it's pretty natural for us to kind of do that. I had one other set of questions, which was on travel, which I think I mentioned that the game flow is going to be a lot different at launch in terms of like how far you have to run. But there are 2 travel systems planned. For one, you'll be able to ride on your Cryptomon when they're an adult, so you'll be able to ride on them and also eventually learn to fly in certain cases. And then there is also a portal-based travel, which you probably saw. So all of the main cities in each of the regions have a portal. There's some storyline around that you'll learn about. You'll have to unlock them. So a little bit of exploration. Once you unlock them, you can basically take them as a transport system between each of the regions. So if you need to go back to Primus or go to Aura from Bosco, you don't have to run. You'll basically be able to portal. There is also a semi-planned feature to allow you to do quick travel within a region. So like you can unlock sort of mini portals or travel systems. For those of you that play World of Warcraft, it's like the Griffin system. There is plans to potentially do that, but we're going to sort of hold off on that until we know if like the travel with the mounts and stuff is fast enough.
Awesome. And then the last thing I have in chat, will there be any incentive to revisit lower level dungeons? So like once you beat the poacher and we're 10 months down the line, will you ever fight the poacher again?
Yeah, so there, like I mentioned, we're going to reuse some of the dungeons with hero mode. So you'll play the poacher scaled up, probably with more new mechanics. There is also an achievement system in game. So I used to love achievements. It was one of my favorite things to do just because it gave the game so much depth of things to do that didn't like feel like you were grinding. So there will be achievements per dungeon also. So maybe there's a unique achievement for finishing the poacher a certain way that you're not going to be able to do when you're level 15. And you'll have to come back and revisit that content. In terms of sort of the lower level regions, we're also playing with like the resourcing pattern on crafting. So like maybe some of the high level crafting patterns have low level crafting material requirements. And because of our scaling system, when you go back to that subregion, to go get that material, you're scaled down and it still feels like it's a journey versus just
Mhm.
coming through and destroying everything. Like coming through and one shotting level 10 rabid rose tails is kind of like farming the bug leaper.
Yeah.
Like whoever's farming the bug leaper, I have no respect for you. Uh, but that's sort of what it feels like. You don't want to come in one shot and like you build this amazing game, this huge open world with this great compelling story, and when you go back there, it just feels a little bit like non-interesting because like you're
Mhm.
just killing everything. That being said, your trainer will get scaled down, but your armor probably will still have some effect. So you're gonna have an easier time doing that
Mhm.
type of stuff. But like I mentioned, maybe there's also rare crafting pattern drops. So maybe like there's only one way to get like the poacher's helmet or the poacher's hat as a cosmetic, and you have to beat that boss 1,000 times to get the drop, something like
Yeah.
that. It's kind of cool to play around with those unique aspects, especially since once you have them, they have a unique value because they're going to potentially generate NFTs. So
Mhm.
we're going to play around with like very rare drops. There is also the concept of rare spawns, so shinies. They'll be on very crazy random timers. And so maybe you have to go back to a small region to go find a rare spawn, or maybe there's a rare spawn in a dungeon and that guy only shows up every 50 runs. Um,
It's almost like the
so
loot
there'll be
goblin
reasons
in
to go back,
Diablo.
and obviously with the dungeons you'll get scaled down too. So you'll be able to help your friends. Like if somebody in the guild if someone new joins your guild and you want to help them sort of level up, you'll be able to go in and help them. So we're going to work on obviously replayability and all that type of stuff. I don't like to spend a ton of time on something that a person plays once and then throws away. I just feel like it's kind of a waste. So that's sort of our strategy when it comes to that type of stuff.
Awesome. I think that covers that. So I have three questions left, and then we're gonna cut it off.
Yep,
So
sounds good.
are dungeons going to have a greed/need system? I don't know if you've ever played Final Fantasy, but
Yeah.
what the
So
loot at
we
the
are
end is
still,
split, and then you okay.
yeah, there are party loot settings that we're working on building. So I'm hoping it will be there as part of the next preview. Um, but the group leader will be able to set basically a loot scheme on
Mhm.
the team. So the guild leader can say whether it's need or greed first, any role. You can basically also eventually, one of the reasons why we added that rarity that you guys are seeing in your inventory, the loot system, the party leader will be able to say anything over uncommon will be need greed roll, right? So
Mhm.
you don't have to have somebody have to roll on like
Like
a
leather
piece of
cloth
meat.
or
Yeah,
meat.
exactly. Like
Is it?
just and we'll also build mechanics like the party system. The way it's going to work is like it's also going to split XP. It's also going to let you do quests in a party. So like if you're within range and somebody else is killing a rabid rosetail and you're questing with them, you'll both get credit for it. There'll also be a mechanic for open world loot for the party where it like might just randomize across, or maybe you'll have to set like the party loot to be any.
Mhm.
So we're working through that mechanic so that way party stuff is actually fair and equitable. And then obviously we'll make mechanics so like in the middle of a boss fight you can't have the group leader can't change the rules.
Can't do it.
So
All right.
so
I get it all. All right. The next one, and this seems like a pretty hot topic, an auto attack system, so players aren't spamming Q or one.
so
What?
we've been talking a lot about this, and I've been going back and forth. The challenge that I have is like the purpose of the attack is basically to keep the player engaged, which I know sounds weird, but the combat may feel a little off if you don't have to actually push buttons to attack. It was one of my gripes with like some of the other games that I've played where like if you had an auto attack on, if you didn't have 1,000 other things to be doing and like you're supposed to be weaving your auto attack in with other spells, then it feels a little weird to just sit there and do nothing for a period of time.
And it, I
However, it's not impossible. So To answer the question, nothing is off the table.
Hmm.
Realistically, we have had discussions about auto attack. It is something that has been discussed.
And I'd also like to
Nothing.
chime in here.
Go
I
ahead.
think it's a little weird with this preview since you can't die and like
Yeah,
you are it really is just an auto attack. Like you don't need to move, you
yeah,
don't need to worry about your health, you don't need to worry about
yep,
swapping. So it may
yep,
feel a lot more monotonous because you're just
yep,
sitting there
yep,
auto attacking. That's what you're doing since you can't die. There's no
yep.
like mechanics you have to dodge. So I think it is definitely something like you said. I'm glad to hear that it's on the table. It's not like you're like, no, this is not something like we'll never make it a toggle on, toggle off thing.
Yeah.
It's something that they'll keep an eye on.
Yep. And you
Stuff like that.
probably actually you probably have seen the auto run
Mm-hmm.
feature where like we can double tap on mobile to enable auto run. We would most likely do stuff like that. There's actually already discussions about auto whistle. So there are some game mechanics where it might be useful for even when your Cryptomon is attacking and in physical range to have them still follow you. So like let's say you want to bite the target, but you need to be moving in order to like avoid a wall of fire or
Mm-hmm.
something. You'd be able to basically whistle lock so that way your Cryptomon will still follow you, but you'll be able to attack and they won't just stick to the target.
Attack like anything
So
in
we
range
would
of
do
them.
something similar with like the attack. We'd do basically a toggle where you could double tap it or toggle it basically to be an auto attack. Um, the other reason why we haven't done anything is like I mentioned, there's a bunch of different archetypes coming. So healers don't necessarily have to auto attack. Like they don't have to attack to generate charges
Mm-hmm.
anymore. So physical attacks are not going to necessarily be the only way that you can generate charges in a big boss battle. So we're going to sort of see how things play out as the game progresses. But yeah, like the auto attack would literally take the devs probably 2 days to build. So it's not like not off the table, but not sort of set in stone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's sort of where like that's pretty much everything. So like we're playing an early release, nothing's been set in stone. We haven't done balancing.
Mm-hmm.
We'll sort of work through these things as we go, and obviously that's why we do these things is to get feedback from the community and understand like what they're finding is cumbersome or not fun or what they want to see more of, that type of stuff.
All right, and then it's the obligatory. When's the next preview? Is the question we'll end on. I think that's a good way to end the closing party. Is when is it? When's the next opening party? Do you have any insight on?
Is that someone from our marketing team?
It's not. That
Because I get that
is
question all the time. So
someone from
here's
Brazil.
the
Um,
way that things work. I don't like to put dates out until I have a good handle on what exactly is involved and how. Like, I like to be deeper into development before we provide dates.
mhm.
That being said, my target is to not let more than 3 or 4 months go by for previews to come out. If something comes out sooner, I'm not set to the 3 4 months.
Mhm.
Like we may have, and there's also been discussions about doing non-preview related events in Kogia for different types of activities. So, not saying that you're not going to see it again for 3 to 4 months, but I can pretty much say that like a major feature in general takes at least 3 to 4 months to get fully polished and out into a point where like you could actually make it work. So realistically, we're probably looking at least 3 to 4 months out, but it's going to all be based on sort of the team's progress from a development perspective. So
Mhm.
unfortunately, I can't give great dates and timelines, but my goal is to obviously have people in the game as often as possible because it gives us a lot of good feedback, helps us optimize the game, and it makes people understand what we're building and why it's going to be so much fun.
Mhm. Also, yeah, I think that's a great answer. And people are saying like 3 to 4 previews a year is insane. That's a ton of
Yeah.
previews. So like
Yeah, I mean, my goal,
you
like I said, is like whenever we have something that's of relative use for a person to test, like the battle, like if you saw this battle engine, it's not perfect. It's
mhm.
not like the final version. But when we started to sit down and do QA, we realized like, hey, this is good enough for players to test. Like, let's get their hands on it. Let's see what they say. Let's figure out where the bugs are. So that's sort of like the approach. I take a very sort of agile approach to building games. I want players to constantly be in them. I want feedback. I want to make sure we're constantly making good choices as we go. I think the worst thing you can do is build a game for 5 years, like an MMO, like World of Warcraft, and not get any feedback. Like
Mhm.
you have like no idea what your players find fun, what's going to break down, that type of stuff. So that's really going to be our approach. Like I mentioned, we're going to keep working through the previews. We're also having discussions, like I said, about an early access launch, which is a pretty big spoiler, but we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get more details. But that's pretty much all I can share today, unfortunately.
I think you've shared plenty. We are at an hour and a half. So I think we've got a good stream.
All
We
right.
got a lot of spoilers.
Yeah.
Got a
Well,
lot
I'm
for next
I'm glad
time.
everyone joined. I hope everyone had fun. I think it was awesome to see everybody in the game. All the new people, welcome.
We
I
gave
know we got a
Axel a
bunch of
ton
new
of work
people.
to go write
Yeah.
up a write up
Axel's
a
gonna be busy
summary
for
of
like the next
everything that
3 days while
happened.
he's killing brushback. So
He's just I think he's gone crazy. He's running around me in the game naked with his group.
the
Dude,
last
he's
thing I will mention before we close stream, you will see an announcement coming out for a special event on Monday for Break the Server. So, in order to get some more data about what was going on that first day, we're going to ask everyone to try and log in at a specific time all at once again. That way, we can do some network tracing and some debugging. As a thank you for the community for helping us out, we're going to drop an extra shard to anyone that logs in during that block. So you'll get an extra pink moon shard as a reward in your wallet at when we mint them. But stay tuned and watch the socials for basically the timing of everything.
awesome. And just one last thing to clarify
Yeah.
because we had some questions last time. How do players get their 10 pink moon shards that they earned in this event? Will it be airdropped at the end of their wallet? Do they have to fill out
Yeah.
a survey?
So that
Is there
everyone
any
will have
extra
to fill out
steps?
a survey. Yeah, everyone will have to fill out a survey. Like last time, I know some people missed it. Make sure you keep an eye on it. We will also post a bunch of reminders. Obviously, the purpose of this is for us to get feedback. So we want to make sure we're getting as much feedback as possible. And so basically, once the window has finished for filling out the surveys, we'll take the list of people who finished the survey, grab their wallets, and we'll airdrop the pink moon shards to them at that point.
Yep. So we'll just to make sure we know that the purpose is to get feedback. So even if you earn 10 shards in game, you still need to fill out that form to have them airdrop to your wallet.
Yep. Absolutely.
But yeah, so I think it's better to end on a hashtag break the server, which we'll be doing.
Break the
tomorrow.
server with me Monday, guys.
Break the server.
And until
That's
then,
the plan.
enjoy killing all the creatures in the world.
Keep on slaying. See if we can get
All right, guys.
100,000. Who knows? All right.